Good evening? Oh my. Yes, it's been a time warp and it is now 7 p.m. Where did that time go? Good afternoon. My name is Lori Burquam and I am the Executive Vice President here at MCC for the next 12 hours or so. And I am really thrilled to be able to spend some time with you this afternoon. As you know, we have a commitment, a campus commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we've asked all of you to participate here today. And as we get started, I also want you to turn and face the camera if you're comfortable and wave, because this is being taped for our colleagues who are unable to make it, or do the wave. Thank you, John. But this is being taped for our colleagues who are not able to make it. So if you are uncomfortable with that, you are welcome to, and we will honor your personal decision with that, and you're welcome to sit kind of out of camera purview if that's how you would like to be. So in my short amount of time here at MCC, one of the most common things I've heard, and I want to echo to you, is, what's our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion as a campus, as a college? Who do we want to become? And I've heard that time and time again, and I've also heard, how do we want to diversify our team? And I found this quote, and I found it pretty spot on, because one aspect of it is diversity, but more importantly, it's including. And as a college, how do we set the stage to not just invite people to join us, but more importantly, how do we invite them to be part of the team? How do we ask them to dance? And so what we hope to set the stage for you today is what we mean by that, and taking time for the DEI focus, especially as we have this great opportunity with 15 new faculty, and we have numerous staff positions. So this is our first effort at how do we help our search committees be empowered to really have a broad group of people that we get an opportunity to bring to campus to showcase our amazing campus and our amazing college, and to invite them to be part of our teams. So our commitment is broad. And one of the things that I think is important as we think about this is also our focus on students, because we are educating our future leaders. We are educating those who will be in the classroom, those who will be in healthcare, those who will be in professions that are technologically inclined. We are educating the future. And with that comes some responsibility. And so I love this quote, especially that which is in yellow, and that is, inclusion is about making a better world for everyone. So if you think about that's what we're doing, we're making Mesa, MCC, a better place, but more importantly, we're making a better world for everyone. And that's a commitment I think we need to make on behalf of our students. Our students, as you walk across our campus or look across your classrooms, you know that they are representing a diverse body. How are we making sure that we are doing the same when we're thinking about our new hires for faculty and for staff? And as committee members, on search committee members, we know that every one of us owns best practices when it comes to thinking about diversity, thinking about inclusion, and beginning those conversations about equity. But what I like about this is that the value of a diverse team is its capacity to challenge the norm. That's what diversity can bring to us, and that's exciting. It takes all of us to do this. It's not just the EVP, it's not just a couple of people who are on a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee. It takes all of us, and this is our first step. Let me be clear. We don't expect by the time you finish here today that you're going to be DEI aficionados. That's not the goal. The goal here is to introduce you to some ways in which, as we take one piece, and that's the hiring process and the search committee process, one piece. How can we commit ourselves to doing it even better with regard to diversity, inclusion, and equity? I also want to mention that, so you'll be, I'm foreshadowing for you to do, we're going to be doing some activities, so those of you who like to kind of sort of be forewarned that you're going to have to be engaging with those sitting at the table next to you. I'm giving you, this is your foreshadowing of that. But we're also going to introduce to you some of the data, and I want to be really clear. It's always easy, and this is coming from a mathematician, remember that's my background, it's easy to want to pull apart or pick apart the data. I think what's important for us to do is to think about the stories behind the data, the individual faces that it recognizes and represents at our college. So finally, I want to leave you with what I'm hoping for here at MCC in our culture of creating who I think we can become. And that is that we want a culture that is inclusive of everyone, where everyone who joins feels they have opportunities to succeed and grow. And I'll add on to that, I didn't get approval from Nellie, but, and thrive. Because we want our students to thrive, but also I want each of you and the teams that you create within your departments to thrive. That's when we're going to be humming on all cylinders. That's when we're really going to be there on our cutting edge as higher education leaders. Now I'm going to turn it over to Dennis to talk a little bit about some of the, unless we change this. We did this morning, and we did take feedback, and we want your feedback also as we finish up today, because again, this is our second iteration of this. We want to continue to refine this so that we can be the best that we can be. Oh, now we're going to go to Nora. Sorry. Oh, and again, if you have any doubt in your mind about the why behind this, it is for our students. That's the why. It is for our students.
Good afternoon, everyone. And just to clarify, Lori's next 12 hours, that statement did not mean that she's leaving us. She's leaving us as executive vice president. She will be coming back on Monday as our interim president. Thank you very much for stepping up, Lori. I'm Nora Reyes, and I'm a senior associate vice president recently in this position, but have been with Mesa, as many of you know, for more than 20 years now. As I look out at all of you, I recognize some faces. Many of you have a lot of experience working with our diverse populations. Some of you have degrees in equity and multicultural aspects of our world in your various fields. So with humility, we present what we present, knowing that you have much to offer and expecting that you will share that amongst yourselves as well. So we're all on a different journey from where we are. Having gone through 3 different degrees myself that were focused on diversity issues, I still find that I have a lot to learn, and I learned most from my students when I was in the classroom, to tell you the truth, and I learned so much from all of you. So what we're hoping for is to begin nurturing, or to continue nurturing, that the culture of open-mindedness, a flexible mindset that opens us up as well to additional learning and growing. So having read those quotes and heard Lori's insights, let's take a moment to just reflect on ourselves. Much of what this builds on is our understanding of ourselves, that question, who am I? And then we'll move into the who are you and who are we together. So in terms of the who am I question, for 1 minute, I'd like you to take a piece of paper and something to write with. You can do it on your computers if you wish. There's note cards, index cards at your tables, and pencils if you need one. So for 1 minute, I'd like for you to complete this sentence. Now, just without really thinking, just write down whatever comes to mind. Complete that sentence as many times as you can. I am. As many endings to that sentence as you can. Begin. And with that, I'd like to turn the floor over to Dennis Mitchell, who's our Director of Institutional Effectiveness.
Good afternoon, everyone. Are you going to control for me? Thank you. All right. So much of what we do at MCC is guided by data, and this is no different. We've been looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion data for many years. So I'm going to set up some context for you as we continue this discussion. Mesa Community College is a Hispanic serving institution. In the last few years, our Hispanic student population has grown to approximately 32%. The federal government gives you HSI designation at 25%. And nationally, there's a general desire to attain equity for all students in education, and that's very true of MCC as well. Faculty, of course, play an extremely critical role in student success, yet faculty of color are underrepresented in higher education. In fall 2017, a couple bullet points from the National Center for Educational Statistics, 19% of students in higher education were Latinx, only 6% of faculty, full-time faculty in higher education were Latinx. 56% of students were white, yet 76% of faculty are white. So there's some very large gaps in the demographics in higher education between faculty and students. At MCC, this is a map of the East Valley. The 101 is kind of the other edge of the map. You can see our two campuses, and around the southern and Dobson campus, very more diverse. The darker the shading and this orange peach color is the higher the percentage in the census tract that is a diverse, a minority population. So around Red Mountain, it is a little less diverse. You can see around the Southern and Dobson campus in downtown Mesa, and then down below in downtown Chandler, it's very much more diverse. We have different student trends. Quite a lot has changed over the last 15 years or so. Students in 2004, we had 66% of our student body was white. In 2018, that number has dropped to 48%. For faculty in 2004, we had 78% of our full-time faculty were white, but in 2018, 79% of our faculty are white, so it stayed about stable. Hispanic students in 2004, 15% of our student body were Hispanic, and in 2018, that number was 30%. The number of Hispanic faculty in this time has actually decreased from 10% to 6%. You can take a quick second and look at some of the other groups as well. They've stayed a little more stable. This chart is from MCC, or the employee demographics were from our HR department. We compare the City of Mesa MCC students and different categories of MCC employees in each row. We put a red box around the white and Hispanic just because they're the two largest populations in the city and for the college. It's not to say the rest of the populations aren't important, but they've been much more stable over time. The City of Mesa as a whole is 63% white and 27% Hispanic. MCC students, when this data was from, were 48% white and 30% Hispanic. But MCC employees as a whole are 69% white and 11% Hispanic. Residential faculty are 79% white and 6% Hispanic. Adjunct faculty are 81% white, 5% Hispanic. And our non-faculty employees are 59% white and 19% Hispanic. And then the other groups have stayed relatively stable. This is the same information, just in a bar graph to help visualize it. We have the white populations on this top, and then the Hispanic populations in the bottom half. And you can see that we have some pretty big gaps between these two populations in the city and MCC students and our employees. The next couple slides, there's a little bit of research, citations. Why is this important? Why are we looking at this? You could obviously write many dissertations and book on this topic, so this is just not even a scratching at the surface level. But in general, research shows that when students find people of similar races and ethnicities and can identify with people similar to them, it improves student engagement and preparation to succeed in a diverse world. Students have a higher sense of belonging when the faculty and employees are more diverse. Students have increased their sense of academic validation in more diverse environments. Campus climate has been found to impact both student and faculty and employee success, as well as the retention of students of color. Black students in particular in several studies have reported feeling more comfortable speaking with other black individuals because they felt like they would be better understood. And to one of Lori's points in the beginning, research has shown that diverse companies and teams in the business sector have more productivity and innovation and are more beneficial. So as I mentioned, we've been looking at this data for quite a while, and in around 2017, the Strategic Planning Committee started putting together a proposal to add diversity, equity, and inclusion as a strategic priority for the college. This was submitted in 2018. It was unanimously supported by Faculty Senate and the student government. It was recommended by the former Shared Governance Council and then approved by Dr. Haney in spring of 2019. We started with 4 goals. These were to get our work started until we can form a DEI council to really look at the framework and planning for the college in the DEI area. We want to look at our student achievement and opportunity gaps, foster inclusive campus climate, and recruit and retain diverse workforce. And as part of this effort, we have an ongoing climate assessment that you might be aware of and have hopefully seen many emails and nods to take the survey that's currently out. We're also having the same consultant look at our interview questions to give us an idea of if any of our questions have any biases and to help us inform future better versions of those questions in the future. Last semester, as part of this climate assessment, we held many focus groups, or our consultant held many focus groups. And so our fellow employees are also noting some issues and perceptions they have with diversity, equity, and inclusion on campus. In general, there's a perception that while our student body and our support staff are diverse, our faculty and administration are not. There's a perception that hiring practices lack diversity and are generally superficial in diversity, with many participants noting that we have one, required diversity question and one required diversity committee member, and they felt that was superficial. And many employees in the focus groups recommended that we have mandatory training related to DEI for search committees. My last slide is 2 quotes. I think focus groups are powerful because these are our colleagues that are speaking to us, so it's important to listen. The first one talked about, what we're starting to do here today is, as Lori said, the first step is examining our processes and our strategies to figure out, where may we be excluding people or not as inclusive as we would like. The second quote is a little longer, and this is an example of somebody commenting on the superficiality of some of the processes or their perception that is that way. That we invite somebody to be on the search committee just because they're Black or Hispanic, but maybe not because they have expertise in an area. So with that, we'll hand it over to Donna Adams, our HR manager.
So that is a good lead, and there's a bunch of initiatives that are going on both here and across the district for improvements to our hiring practices. And I believe Patrice, it was either earlier this week or last week, did send out a request for participation on some of those district committees to the residential faculty. So I urge you, if you have an interest in that area, to volunteer. We definitely want to have participation on all levels to make things better going forward in the future. There's also other efforts here that we're doing within our own HR office and with the PAF process, as I know is a pain point for a lot of people. So look forward to more good things coming with that. And This morning, we did have a lot of good feedback on other options and changes, so please don't hesitate if you're not comfortable in the venue today to talk to us in person or submit. There'll be a feedback option later on so that we can all just continue to move forward and make it better for our applicants and make it better for our committee members. One thing I just want to mention is even though we've had a little bit of a delay and a setback to make sure this meeting happens before the search committee meeting materials are released, we haven't really impacted the timeline much. We're still within the confines of what was originally distributed. This was sent to your hiring manager, so I'll make sure that they continue to receive this information. But our overall goal is to have our finalists identified by graduation, and we are still on track to do that. My team has also put together the emails, so as soon as everybody's completed the workshop, we can go in and hit send to you, so some of those may even go out later this afternoon. There are, I believe, 4 postings that are still open that after they close next week, we'll be sending those out. And there's a couple of the committees that are still working on their faculty transfer process candidates. So those will continue forward before the major candidate pool will be released. So Dennis pointed out about the committee composition. It is required to have 2 screeners and 3 interviewers, and there needs to have gender and ethnic diversity as well as a subject matter expert. And a lot of the times it feels when we're putting these together that people are just doing so to check a box, which is not really our best interest if we're keeping diversity in mind. One of the things that's going to help us moving forward is there was a survey that went out a couple weeks ago to obtain to see who else would like to participate on search committees. Because as you know, and as those of you who have created these searches, you tend to go for the same people. You see the same people serving on committees all the time. From what I gathered, just perusing the list of results, at least half of those people have never served on a committee in the 4.5 years I've been in HR. So I think this is going to be a really good opportunity for us to infuse some new perspectives in there and to get additional participants that can contribute to the overall hiring process. For those of you, as you put searches together, and it may be a little late for the faculty ones, we did have a few diverse sources, but our office has over 100 sources of advertisements. So as we continue to think about our job postings and our audience, we have opportunities out there to pay to target different populations, either industry-specific, diverse organizations, or also just other educational institutions that offer that job posting distribution. Next, this is that we kind of went a little further in a discussion, and hopefully that'll come up a little later on. But one of the things that I recommend is that the hiring managers and the committees really get together before they screen and before they interview. Have the level-setting conversations about what your expectations are, what you're trying to get out of it. What do you guys mean when you say the word fit? What kind of answers are you looking for when you see the diversity question? And make sure that those are completed before you move forward and have the candidates in front of you. So you really just have a good understanding of what you're looking for, what's the best needs for your department, what's the best needs for your students. All members are allowed to be advocates for the equity and fair hiring processes. When you're having those conversations, please just be mindful of each other, keep people in check. Remember to continue to ask what it is you're looking for and if it's appropriate. And then just with regard to the decision-making process, if you do have any concerns in your committee, please reach out to us, if not me directly, somebody else in the department, so that we can address any concerns that come up within those committee conversations, or just any general conversation questions that you have about the process in general. I did want to mention that the RFP does say you're supposed to send a minimum of 2, but preferably 3 to 5 candidates forward for that final decision. The pattern in the last few years has, in most cases, been 1, maybe 2. So we'd really like to push towards complying with the RFP and looking at a broader group of applicants throughout the process so that we can have options to review when we get down to that decision-making point. There are some other hiring best practice lists, but I didn't really feel like it was we just want to go through like a zillion bullet points today. So with the screening materials, we're going to send some additional resources to those of you that you can peruse. And some came from our older hiring manuals that we no longer use because some of the data has changed, but for this particular section, it's relevant. And just some other resources so that if anybody would like to broaden their perspective, they're welcome to read that. And then lastly, I just wanted to let you know we now have an onboarding plan in Mesa HR. So it started this week. Actually started, one of the first participants was my new employee, Vanessa. So Vanessa, Eddie, and myself are the team that handles full-time staffing, so you'll be working with all three of us on your searches. Onboarding is partly the new employee orientation to the institution, also does a lot of the paperwork intake. They're going to be looking at those mandatory trainings that we have to do, and any new staff you hire will be going through this process. For the residential faculty population, this group is actually working with Chanel's team. Chanel and Janice have put together the onboarding initiative for Mesa, and it's being replicated across the district. I've asked that they just meet with all of you to determine what the best opportunity is to not affect the week of accountability. So I'll let that team handle that with you, but I did just want to let you know in general that we are now having an onboarding initiative so that we don't have to always send our new employees off to the district to get this initial training and benefits information. So hiring questions, if you have them, let me know so I can bring the mic to you so it can be captured on the recording. And just as a comparison, those this morning did have questions. Vanessa has a question.
Has the college considered having students on committees?
Good question. There are committees that have had it. It's just been usually a little more difficult with scheduling purposes, but you are allowed to have students on the committees, and also just, you know, a lot of the times the faculty committees have been predominantly faculty, but you are able to have staff and other people participate in those as well. You can invite adjunct and OIO if they're not planning to apply for those positions. It's a good opportunity for them to see the other side of the hiring process. Any others? Okay, well, we'll stay afterwards for a few minutes too if you think of anything else, so just let me know. And Nora? Do you want to both have one?
Hello, can you hear me? Okay. My name is Megan McGuire. I'm library faculty here, and I'm co-chair of the Strategic Planning Committee. And so over the past few years, I've been really engaged in DI work. But as Nora said, I am no expert in this, so everything I say to you with humility, like Nora said. So why are we here? We're here because diversity is who we are. It's a part of our existence. It's something that just is. And in order to create an inclusive environment, we need to engage diversity, embrace it, and it's how we put diversity into action and use different experiences and ways of thinking and backgrounds to create value. And in order to do that, we have to recognize and respect the inherent worth and dignity of all people who are here. And we also need to create a sense of belonging and sustain that sense of belonging for all people. Right? So this isn't something that you just do once and then you're done. It's something you integrate into what we do. It's not about the end. It's not about how many people we hire. It's about the processes in which we hire them. And we need to institutionalize inclusion and diversity and equity in order to do those things. So through the process of inclusion, that's when we start to create a more equitable environment. And equity is something that you use to break down barriers that have traditionally been there, that have excluded people, right? And what was I gonna say? I'm sorry, I'm really nervous because I'm being recorded, which I didn't know till yesterday. So, yes, it breaks down barriers, and it helps ensure higher success rates that are equal for all people, regardless of who they are. And so, when we create a more equitable environment, it creates, what is that word, Nora, you always say? Social capacity. Yeah, she just taught me that word. So social capacity is when we all work together cooperatively and openly to help each other for the betterment of all people, right? So, yeah, that's my slide. So how do we get there? Go ahead. So we need an awareness that we need to be inclusive, right? We need an understanding of ourselves, who we are, how we identify, what we value, what our biases are. We need to understand other people, which might require educating ourselves, ongoing and always. And it takes us working together to create a more equitable environment. So, oh, you have my.
Okay, so now I'd like to ask you to go back to that card from the initial exercise, what you wrote on that. And we'll take another minute or two, since there's two of you that are going to be sharing. Just pick a partner near you and share your I am statements. After you've shared them with one another, below that line, you may notice that there were things that your partner shared that you weren't thinking about. So feel free to add below that line, just for your own reflection, to increase your own level of awareness of what first came to your mind, top of mind, and what was still definitely what is still part of who you are, but maybe wasn't top of mind for whatever reason. So let's give you a couple of minutes for that. So as you were writing your I am statements and then hearing about others, perhaps it came to mind that the context you're sitting in may have influenced what you wrote down. What happened this morning may have influenced what you wrote down. And in a different setting or under different circumstances, your list might have looked very different. Well, when we work with people, we have different experiences every day, right? So those that we're working with, it applies to them as well. So we need to keep that in mind and know that those things also influence the dynamics between us and how we interact with one another. Specific core questions I'd mentioned earlier. These are all these exercises, what we're trying to do here, and even as we venture through life, these are questions that we continuously ask ourselves or should or could be asking ourselves if we're wanting to be more aware, increasing that awareness so that we can engage more deeply with one another. Who am I? Who are you? And who are we together? How do your responses to those questions influence how you respond to others? And how do others' responses to those questions influence how they respond to you? It goes both ways. Keep that in mind. And as members of a search committee, how will your responses to these questions influence how you engage in those activities of hiring employees into our institution? These are some of the whys in terms of why are these questions important. So they reflect a variety of different social issues, certainly. And as we look at, an image of some young kids, it looks like maybe bullying was going on, some horrible things that have happened in our history that we're not very proud of, some exclusive activities or realities that have been part of our history as well, and in some places around the world and in our own country still are. The last one is particularly shocking still. While we know we've come a long way, active hate groups, I don't know if you can see that heading, but these are active hate groups. So yes, we've come a long way. We need to acknowledge that. But we still have a long way to go. That's why these questions are important. We need to understand ourselves, we need to understand one another, and we need to understand how our responses to those questions impact how we interact with one another. We're after the first column, not the second one. But these are some of the consequences when people either do feel included or are excluded. So again, our why goes back to, why are we all here? I think most of us that go into the field of education in whatever capacity, we want to make a positive change in the world and in the lives of others. And that has to do with helping people become their best selves, that self-actualization piece, right? Not only are we trying to become our best selves, but we want to support others in becoming their best selves. That's typically the case for most of us that go into education. We also know, especially working in the community college, we know that there are a lot of realities down here at the basic needs level of Maslow's hierarchy. And those have to be addressed before we or others, or before we can help others, reach the higher levels. So again, why strive for inclusion? In order to help others help self-actualize, in order to help ourselves self-actualize, we need to address these, encourage realities that do support a sense of belonging. The sense of belonging is a core piece of inclusion. And then we can work our way up. So it is critical that we address from the bottom all the way to the top. And we may start with that ideal of we want to make a difference in people's lives. We want to be the best people we can be. We want to help others be the best people they can be. How do we get there? And that's where it comes to our focus today as well on equity-mindedness. So through, we talk about awareness, we talk about the importance of inclusion, but equity is the goal. We want to make this place meaning every layer of the onion there, right? Within our own lives, in our personal lives, in our work lives, professional lives, within our community, society, state, nation, world. It goes from micro to macro. So I'm going to hand the floor back over to Megan so that she can go through some of these. These are very obvious, superficial things, but how do they really impact what we do? How do they impact us day to day? And some of these may be things we don't think about very much, but we need to bring them to our conscious awareness level so that we align what we do with what we want to do and challenge ourselves to be aware of those things that we unconsciously think about, bring them to the conscious level so that what we act on is aligned with our conscious level and not the unconscious level that sometimes is not what we want to be. We'll talk a little bit more about that shortly.
Yes. So when we first see somebody or meet somebody, we automatically start trying to categorize them, and put them in boxes, right? These are the top 5 things that you first notice about people: their skin color, their gender, their age, their appearance, which means what they're wearing, their size, how many tattoos they have, what color hair they have, if they have any hair, and their body language. How are they standing? Are they forgetting what they're saying when they're speaking? Yeah. In presentations. How are they moving around? That kind of stuff. And we do this all the time, including when we're interviewing someone on a hiring committee, right? So this video, which Dennis will play. So that is an example of somebody totally being dismissed and underestimated just because of what she looked like, her age, how she spoke when she first walked out there. So we need to be very aware, go to the next slide, of our stereotypes we have towards other people. You all know what a stereotype is, and about what biases that we have, whether they're explicit or implicit. We'll talk more about implicit biases later. But we need to be very conscious of that and actively work against our biases and try to recognize them and not deny that we have them. So
it's really not a question of, am I biased? It's a question of, how am I biased? Because we all are biased. We all were born into whatever reality we were born into without any choice of our own. It was just our reality, right? So that reality created an environment around us that helped to frame our current frame of reference. So some of those things we had no control over. As we got older, we made some choices that led us down different paths, and then we had a little bit more control over some things. But there were some things early on that we didn't have any control over. And from that very first day, our brains were beginning to develop. And what we've been exposed throughout our lives and to today, and will continue until we're no longer here in this existence, we continue to grow and our brains continue to receive the stimuli and grow dendrites to understand our reality. When we learn things early on, it's really hard to stray away from what has been learned early on, and they get solidified. So if later in life we're exposed to something different that is in conflict with something we learned early on that had been supported and encouraged in some ways, or kind of solidified in our brains as truth, as reality, it's that much harder. The longer it stays in there, it's that much harder to begin to think differently. So as we get older and we learn more things and we're exposed to more, and we may come to realize there were some experiences we had that we perceived in certain ways that now we think differently about. Maybe the way somebody in our past treated others, we now see as very unfair, but that was just kind of the way things were back then. It's going to take a lot longer for those of us who grew up with that as a default to unlearn that behavior. So I wanted to point that out because we need to give ourselves a little bit of slack, give yourself some grace when you identify some of those things that now you feel like, oh, that was twisted. I shouldn't have been doing that, or so-and-so in my life. That was not an appropriate way to deal with others. If you recognize that now, give yourself some grace to know that, my awareness is, okay, I want to do it differently, but my default is the way that I don't want to do it. So it's going to take some time. Just be aware of that. The first step is that awareness step, and it's going to take a concerted effort. Sometimes a really big effort, depending on how long you've been living that other reality. So what's important about this is those do come into play in our everyday interactions, and they will come into play when you're sitting on a search committee, when you're reviewing the applications that come in, how you're perceiving a person's background, their experiences. When you see them walk into the room, those things that were in the prior slide, the first, very superficial things that we notice, they do have an impact on how you interpret who that person is that has walked into the room. Whether conscious or unconscious, they impact your thinking. So we're encouraging you to be very aware of those areas in your thinking that you may need to think more about. Bring that to your more conscious level so that if there is some conflict in how you feel you want to think, but what you know your defaults may be intentional when those things arise and question yourself about it, pause, and then respond. Because those are the pieces that are going to be particularly hard and challenging for us when they are in conflict with what we've been exposed to in the past. So implicit bias is specifically the one that I'm referring to here. You can see the definition up there. The last two words are the most important to focus on and to acknowledge. In an unconscious manner. That's what's dangerous because we're not even aware that this is happening. So it becomes an issue of being very intentional about increasing your awareness and bringing those things to a conscious level. And as you see here, these implicit biases are very pervasive because they are our defaults. They're our reaction before we even think. They're just almost like an instinct. That third bullet, do not necessarily align with our declared beliefs, is what I was getting at earlier. Sometimes we'll catch ourselves thinking, why did I why did I do that? Usually it's in hindsight. I found myself doing that when my less than 1-year-old was pointing back at me like this, and I realized, well, first I asked, where did she get that? That's rude. She's doing this to me? I was the only one she'd really been around, and I had always been with her, so I would have seen if somebody else had done that, so I couldn't understand. Where'd that come from? And then the next time I was telling her not to do something, I was going like this, oh my gosh, it was me. Some of these things are just, we don't even realize them until somehow they're mirrored back to us, or we raise our own self-awareness and force ourselves to be more conscious of them. So hone in on that, or be aware that these implicit biases are at the unconscious level, which is what makes them very dangerous. There are defaults, potentially dangerous. I mean, there are some implicit biases that might actually work in our favor and promote positive interactions. But we need to be questioning what it is that we're doing and make sure that it's aligned, that our defaults are aligned with who we want to be and how we want to behave, versus something that, if you're doing something like this and you don't want that done to you, you're changing that intentionally. Moving on, I'm going to hand the floor over to Megan, who will bring some of this to the reality that you're facing now, coming upon hiring, or some of the hiring processes. When people come in and they're in front of you, or when you're screening, what questions are you going to be asking yourselves, or what things do you have to be aware of?
So we thought it might be helpful to look at some questions that might come up when you're on hiring committees. I guess you can show all of them. So how many minutes do we have? 15? 20 minutes, yes. Okay, let's do the first one, and then we can choose one of the other ones to do, and if we have time, we can do a third one. So I hear this a lot. What is a good answer to a DEI question? Like, how do you grade that? What do you look for? And Anya added, are we allowed to post that? Can you go to the next slide? Those are the typical diversity questions in the job. Those are the actual ones in our question bank. So in your groups at your table, talk about what would you look for that would be a good answer in these types of questions. Why don't we let that back table go first to tell us what they came up with the mic.
So what we talked about was about in the hiring committee that I've experienced is some of the interviewees would share their experience with DEI and how they could implement it and help the structure of this college and what they have as far as their subgroup, not the subgroup, well, what is it? With their experience with the DEI and how they could help the college grow using their experience and seeing the demographics that the college has, so they could incorporate their experience and also and knowing our community. Oh, and then some interviewees didn't take the time to actually research where they were going to, what type of communities they're going to be serving prior to their interviews. Thanks.
You did it. I believe you, girl.
Thank you, yes. So if the candidate talks about their experience with DEI and how they can help. Right? Who else wants to go?
So in our example, Peter brought up how sometimes candidates look like a deer in headlights with the question, what are they asking me? So maybe starting off giving an example of what diversity means, so they don't just initially think race. We can talk about diversity in terms of religion, gender, culture, whatnot. So maybe bringing that to the forefront of the question. So we're HR here, so we're taking down these notes. So that's one area. And then we did, what was your example of the holiday?
In a previous department or previous work experience, we had an individual that was of a different religious background that did not celebrate holidays, and so it was an interesting experience to navigate that and say, you know, around December we would have an office party or just a potluck rather than saying it was related to any particular holiday or what have you. Just celebrating the end of the year celebration.
Thank you. Is there another table who wants to go?
Liz pressured me. So we were miscreants who didn't fulfill our homework assignment, but we had an interesting conversation. And we were kind of talking about the concepts of diversity and inclusion and equity. And the thing about diversity that I think no one is addressing is diversability as a term, as opposed to referring to as disability, but diversability. On our hiring committee, we didn't even think about disability studies. We kind of remembered it after the fact and thought, oh, we should have put that in there as one of the areas of expertise that would have been great to have attracted a teacher, you know, in. And so that's one of the things we talked about. And what else? Oh, and then just the how do you gather diversity? What are your measurements? And we were thinking in terms of learning styles, personality. What else? And like even how you do assessments, and if you do them by survey or in meetings or down the hallway or any variety of places, where do these things happen? So it didn't really have to do with the hiring, sorry, but I think we had some points.
Thank you, Keith.
Some excellent points, though, because sometimes those things that are oversights, it's tied to the implicit bias piece as well. They're unconscious, and they may be unconscious biases for things that we pay attention to versus things that we're not paying attention to. So we need to be aware of those as well. It also makes me think of the video, the Susan Boyle video, because every time I see that, it just makes me want to cry. It makes me think about how many undiscovered gems are out there that we haven't allowed to flourish because they just haven't been given the opportunity. And I think Lori was talking about everybody has a story, right? There's stories behind those words. We need to look just beyond the diversity and look at the story. Everyone has a story, and there are strengths there that we can tap. There's so many resources that are often undiscovered when we're not asking the right questions or when we're not looking or focusing on the right things.
At your tables, you can choose the candidate has a communication style that's not of the majority. That was a situation where candidates asked a question, and the way they communicate may not be something of traditional that you're used to. So instead of outlining in bullet points everything they have experienced, all their skills, they tell a story around it. Different cultures have different ways of communicating, and we value those differently. So if that happens, you can talk about that, how you would address that. Or if somebody on your committee claims at the end, well, they're just not a good fit, how would you address that? How would you talk about that? So you can talk about either one of those at your table or something that's come up in your hiring committees that you might want to talk about. So I'll give you a few minutes to do that.
So our question was, for example, what do we mean by doesn't fit into the culture? Because I know, for example, I have interviewed people that you realize you don't think that they're necessarily accepting of things. They want to do things their way. They've been this way all their life. That isn't going to fit into our culture, but I don't think that's necessarily what you mean here. You mean, I think, you don't celebrate Christmas, and we do Christmas concerts every year, so, and that's not true either. But so I think it's okay. I was talking about my daughter has a teacher now at the high school that doesn't really teach, and if you don't have the passion for what we're doing, if it doesn't seem like you have the heart for doing what we're doing, I don't think you fit into our culture. But again, I'm not convinced that's what you're asking here, but maybe I don't know.
Well, it can go both ways. They can not be a fit for very good reasons, but sometimes people may claim they're not a fit for not good reasons that have to do with different implicit biases that they scored them with or they judged them with. So,
And it's actually an excellent question, because if this comes up in your search committee, you should be asking that. What do you mean by that?
mm-hmm.
Let that person define it. What is it that is not the fit? And then the committee can determine, is that justified, and is it important? You know, if the doesn't fit comment is because of misalignment with our mission, then that's a justified comment. If it has to do with other biases that do not allow for inclusion, then that's not a just comment.
Ditto what he says. No, that's actually what we talked about too. Is that we struggled with what does that fit mean? Because sometimes, again, you can kind of understand where something this person said does not align with mission, vision, values, kind of thing. So it's not a good fit. But then again, we're talking about there's clearly things that would not be okay, right? So.
Hi, we talked a lot about the fit, but then we also talked about the communication style. So, Stephanie was such a good sport here, because I was just an instigator with her and pushed her out there. But she had some really, really good things to say, and her communication style isn't the style that many of us are accustomed to or value in American culture. Be strong, be bold, say your thoughts, your ideas, be confident in your ideas. And if someone is not presenting in that way, but they have really powerful things to say, are we listening to what they have to say? And so I think sometimes that's something that we blow over because we're not listening. We're just wanting to get to the answer. I mean, even looking at the number of questions that we ask, we've got 30 minutes and we're going to give you 7 or 8 questions, and now you need to get through them. And if you're not through them very quickly, then we're kind of getting a little impatient. I mean, we have to really think about some of those real westernized attitudes and approaches that we have to things. And then the final thing is that many of us have gotten advanced degrees. Well, our advanced degrees really teach us to think like Anglo men who are wealthy white male landowners, right? So we have to understand some of those things that have been in higher education, the way that we were originally founded for, and think about that.
Really great points. Yeah, I was on a hiring committee where they weren't a good fit because of their communication style. So, but they were from Africa. They were African.
So a lot of times we think of communication styles in terms of like culture or language, but what if just across the board, some people are terrified at interviews? You know from their qualifications they're the perfect person for the job, but they just clam up. They can't even answer the most basic question, and the whole committee is sitting there. When we're nervous, we feel uncomfortable. How do we approach that?
When I said that they weren't a good fit because of communication style, I did not agree with that. But that's what somebody claimed on the committee. Yeah. So, thank you, everybody, for your participation.
And your questions are hard questions. We don't have the answers. Those are questions we need to keep pondering and figuring out as we move through these processes. So it's not like we're trying to give you the right answers.
And I think sometimes our candidates want to say the answers too. And to the point you made, one of the things that we heard in the previous session, is there an opportunity for us to put up on our website sort of preparation for the interview at MCC? So actually some things that will help candidates in preparation. We're not going to give them the questions ahead of time, but we are going to say you'll have a short amount of time and a large number of questions, so practice. That you're going to be speaking in front of a group of maybe 5 people. If that makes you anxious, think about what you might do to collect yourself and to center yourself to be able to present the best you that you can do. I know that this sounds like, well, didn't you learn this somewhere else? Remember, not everybody has the same background. Not everybody has the same experiences. You know, if you go to another country, say, for example, in Uganda, in Africa, actually you apprentice without getting paid for years before you get a position. So you do the work for years without getting a cent before you might be selected for a position. So thinking that there's actually a process could in fact be new to some people. So thank you, first of all, for being here. Thank you for being fully engaged on a beautiful Friday afternoon when maybe you were thinking you had other things that you would have liked to have been doing. I am so proud that you came here and really grateful. You are pioneers here at MCC in what we're doing. And you may think, well, this was no big deal. It was an hour and a half. In fact, being dedicated to this on behalf of our students is absolutely crucial. It's absolutely critical as we continue our work as a campus, as a college, moving forward. We have to do this. We also know that as this is our sort of second iteration, I want to give the team a great round of applause. Because from this morning session to this afternoon session, we actually tweaked it. And I think everybody did better because now we're on camera, right? But in reality, we know we want to refine this. So your feedback is important. And if you're a techie, there you go. And if you are old school, you have note cards on your table or we can provide you more. We are interested in your feedback and how to do this even better in the future. This is a journey, and we are starting it and have started it long before you came into this room. As a college, I know how committed we are to making sure our students thrive. This is another piece of that puzzle of making that happen. So thank you very much to the planning team. Thank you very much to each of you and to our videographer. Thank you, Andrew. And fill out your feedback forms and have a fantastic weekend. Thank you.